So we talked for just a very short time about the rumor, and he dispelled all of the little hints that were supposed to lead to the fact that he might have died.
And as the voice of Roger W. Morgan, this is the Talking Archive. And last time, Roger was talking about his 1969 trip to Scotland to try to get an interview with Paul McCartney, whom along the world thought was dead. Now, here's some of the interview we played last time with the rest of the story.
At that point, I almost felt like he and I were kin. I had such a intense relationship getting there. I said, Paul, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I just want to talk to you for a little bit. And he turned and walked into the barn, at which point I said to Mark, the guy who was ducking down behind the wall, Mark, why didn't you raise up and yell, hey, it's Mark from the London Financial Times? He said, we really only met before a concert in London once, and it was when the Beatles passed us on the way to the stage, and the guy that was directing us back in there said, Beatles, this is the press, and press, these are the Beatles. He said, that really is as close as I've ever been to him before. I don't really know him. So I grab my tape recorder, and it slips out of my hands and falls over on the other side of the wall. I've still got the mic cord in my hand, but the tape recorder fell on the other side. And as I sort of reached over the wall to grab the tape recorder, Paul comes out of the barn with a rifle. Not a high-powered rifle. Looked like a 22 rifle. Just a very modest, maybe shooting birds gun. And he aims it in our general direction, at which point I swoop up the tape recorder and whirl around, and I hear the sound of Mark running behind me. He's running down the hill. He's convinced we're going to be killed on that hillside. Josh, you're hearing this story, and there are very few people I've shared it with over the years because it's a story that can be as frustrating for me to tell as it is maybe fun to hear. But for that moment, I did fear for my life, and we ran all the way to the car, as much as you can run in a rainstorm. We got down to the car, totally breathless. I was ready to vomit. I couldn't breathe. We get down the hill, and we hear the sound of a car coming down the road. And it's Paul McCartney and Linda and Heather. And they're in the car, and we're standing beside our Jaguar mired in the mud. And Paul says, he rolls down the window just enough so that we can communicate. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know why you guys were here, but you got to get off of the mountain now. And I said, look, I'm with Kissin' Radio. Actually, it was Coil Radio. It wasn't Kissin' that I was working with. It was a Coil in Omaha. But Kissin' Radio in Portland is their sister station. So I told him who I was, and I wanted to get a quick interview. And he said to me quietly through the window, I'll give you a quick interview, but I don't want any mention of this, of the details of why we have left London, because we want to get away from this story. He says, it's just not a healthy environment for my wife and my daughter. And he was very calm about it. But he also was concerned about us and didn't seem terribly comfortable with the fact that we were still there. So we talked for just a very short time about the rumor, and he dispelled all of the little hints that were supposed to lead to the fact that he might have died. And in a short, maybe 3-minute interview, Mark from the London Financial Times grabbed the microphone, pushed it through the window, and said, how do you feel, sweetheart, about your daddy being shot at? At that point, we were persona non grata. We were enemies again. And Paul said, that's it. Shut the recorder off. Go home, wherever you're from. And we said, we can't move our car. Paul pushed our car away with his, he had I'm trying to think, a Forerunner. Looked like a Toyota. And he pushed the car out back into the road, and we took off. That is the story. The interview was sold later to RKO to be used in a series they called The History of Rock and Roll. And Josh, as much as people will hear this report and say the guy is full of hot air, that happened. exactly as I have explained it. At some point in the distant future, I'll probably share with you some of the efforts that I've made to get a hold of Paul to have a further conversation with him about it. But he has confirmed it. He did confirm it to a Capitol Records promotion man in San Francisco years later, as yes, it happened. And if I'd have been a better shot, I might have shot him because we thought we were under attack. There's my story, the one that I asked you to ask for. You didn't expect one to last that long, but that's it.
Well, it's a very interesting story there. This is the Talking Archive. We're speaking with Roger W. Morgan and talking about, the hillside encounter with Paul McCartney in Scotland, and just fascinating interview right there. I'm looking back. I guess you wished you had gone alone, so that way that question was not asked. That ended up getting him upset again. I hope that you get to eventually get to talk with Sir Paul again sometime in the next year or so. And how many? I guess. Do you know anybody who knows somebody who knows Paul McCartney, or has that kind of been a challenge recently?
Oh, no, that hasn't been a challenge at all. I heard at one point from an attorney who represented him in Arizona that Paul fervently wished I would stop telling that story. Remember, this happened in 1969. Mm-hmm. I said, did he at least confirm that it happened so that I have somebody here who has heard that that the story really is true? And he said, I'm not calling you to comment on whether he said it happened or didn't happen, but I am calling to tell you it's in your best interest, his best interest, and the best interest of all of us if you stop telling the story. There's nothing to be gained from telling the story other than to stir up something that could be unpleasant. But I said at that point, I don't really need to tell this story over and over again because most of the people I told it to early simply didn't believe it, said it couldn't have happened. But the Capitol Record promotion man, a guy by the name of Bruce Sperling, who was the San Francisco Capitol promotion man in the mid-'70s, went to an event where Paul McCartney was and approached Paul and said, Roger W. Morgan shared a story with me, and I'm just trying to figure out if it's a true story or if it isn't a true story. And Paul McCartney said, trust me, I know about Roger Morgan, and I know about the story, and I wish he'd have never told the story, but the incident occurred maybe in a slightly different way than Roger tells it. That was all I needed to confirm that, yes, someone else had heard from Paul's lips that this event happened. I suspect Paul would say, I never aimed a rifle at him. I never tried to hit him with a shot. But the fact is, this guy was there, and I had a rifle, and yes, I chased him off the mountain because we were worried. We feared for our lives, and I think they did. I think that they really felt that I could have been a terrorist. I mean, and I could see why you might think that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it doesn't give me the impression this guy's a bad guy. It just he didn't know, and there was no communication between Apple Records and Paul's residence about what was going on and stuff. So that didn't help matters either and stuff. Even though you thought there was, I mean, I got kind of the impression that he had been informed, beforehand before he went there that somebody was going to be coming up to visit, and obviously that didn't happen.
As a matter of fact, I did interview John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr later at Apple Records. I got the interview with them when I got back into London, and they were dying to find out what had happened, and I related the story to them, and they were, there were varying degrees of reactions. I got a photograph from them and had it autographed while I was there, and had conversations with all of them later from time to time. So, it isn't that Paul wouldn't grant an interview to a legitimate news person. He didn't want to discuss that story and didn't want to get into it. And I don't blame him. I mean, I just absolutely understand perfectly why it's not a story that he would enjoy having told.
We're talking with Roger W. Morgan, radio DJ, program director, sales manager, as well as general manager. And next time he talks about how he got to go to the Boss of the Bay, a great San Francisco radio station, where he program directed a couple of legendary DJs.